There's a kind of moment that stays with a woman, not because it was dramatic, not because it ended with shouting or long texts, but because it was steady, clean, and completely unexpected. You didn't lash out. You didn't chase. You simply walked away when things no longer aligned with your peace. And that quiet decision, grounded, firm, without explanation, leaves a deeper impression than any final conversation ever could. In today's video, we're not going to talk about what he did. We're going to talk about what you should do, about how to carry yourself like a man of substance, one who doesn't just move on, but moves forward with discipline and dignity. Let's begin. Number 1. Choose calm over closure. When things start falling apart or she pulls away, don't rush to demand explanations or closure. Instead, choose calm. Walk away, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Most men crave that final conversation, but you don't need it. You don't need her to validate your pain or confirm your value. A Stoic man knows that peace doesn't come from what someone else gives you. It comes from what you refuse to chase. If a situation no longer values your presence, the strongest move is to exit quietly, with your dignity intact. Imagine standing in front of a locked door, banging on it, waiting for someone to come open it and tell you why they shut it in the first place. That's what most men do. They wait, they chase, they hope for a satisfying explanation. But a Stoic man doesn't beg for clarity where there is none. He understands what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." So when she creates distance, when her words grow colder, when her actions no longer match her affection, you don't argue. You don't explain yourself endlessly. You don't try to fix what she no longer seems interested in holding. Instead, you choose your calm like a shield. You leave like a man who values himself more than he values being understood. That kind of silence, it lingers. That kind of presence, it's not loud, but it's unforgettable. She may not remember every word you ever said, but she will remember how steady you were when things got messy. She'll remember that you didn't beg. You didn't fight for scraps of attention. You simply stepped away, silent, but not weak. That's what makes her remember you, not because you forced her to, but because you didn't need to. And that quiet strength, that stays with her. Number 2, let stillness speak for you. There's no need to spell everything out. When your words have been ignored, dismissed, or twisted to fit someone else's narrative, speaking more doesn't bring clarity. It brings exhaustion. That's when your silence becomes a statement. Not one of coldness, but of self-mastery. It says, "I'm not here to chase validation. I'm here to protect my peace." And that peace, when you embrace it fully, speaks louder than anything you could have said. A woman doesn't forget the man who stops explaining himself, especially when he once tried, when he once showed up with patience, clarity, and honesty. But when he realizes those efforts fall on deaf ears and he chooses to let go without bitterness, that moment sticks. Not because he made a scene, but because he didn't. He didn't leave with slamming doors or dramatic exits. He simply stepped away like a man who values his soul more than being right. That's what Stoicism teaches us, not to react emotionally to every insult or misunderstanding, but to remain centered. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And in this context, the best closure is to evolve silently, to let your growth become the final chapter she never expected you to write. Picture this clearly. She checks her phone, waiting for one more message, one last explanation. But it doesn't come. Days pass, then weeks. And while others may have yelled or pleaded, you didn't. You just vanished into your purpose. That kind of absence creates more questions in her heart than any paragraph could ever answer. You didn't disappear to be mysterious. You disappeared to reclaim yourself. So don't be afraid to let stillness speak for you. It carries a kind of strength that lingers in her mind, long after your footsteps have faded. Because the man who walks without a word doesn't vanish. He echoes. Before we move on, take a moment to reflect on this. Silence, when it comes from a place of clarity, not anger, has a way of lingering in someone's memory longer than any speech ever could. If that message hit something deep within you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this spoke to your current journey? Share it in the comments, or if you're walking that quiet road with discipline and self-respect, just type, "I let stillness speak for me." Let's keep this conversation grounded in growth and strength. Number 3, walk without begging for understanding. It's tempting to explain yourself, especially when you feel misunderstood. But you don't need to clear your name or convince anyone of your intentions. Let her think what she wants. Let her paint her version of the story. Because when a woman chooses distance, she often expects you to chase, not out of love, but out of ego. She wants to see if you'll fight to be understood, if you'll plead for clarity, if you'll lose yourself trying to make her see your worth. But you don't have to play that part. You're not here to rewrite her narrative. You're here to live yours with quiet certainty. A man who walks away without needing to be validated speaks louder than 1,000 explanations. He doesn't disappear in bitterness. He simply realizes that staying to prove himself is a battle that costs more than it's worth. Even Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You don't need to argue your value. Just be that man. Picture a moment where she misunderstands your silence as indifference or your distance as coldness. You'll feel the urge to fix it, to text something like, "That's not what I meant," or "You're seeing it wrong." But in doing so, you're handing over your frame. You're saying, "Please see me correctly so I can feel okay again." That's not power. That's dependency. The man she ends up remembering isn't the one who begged to be seen. It's the one who stayed composed when misunderstood. The one who didn't fight for closure because his peace wasn't up for negotiation. The one who walked, not because he stopped caring, but because he started choosing clarity over chaos. And that stillness, that calm withdrawal, that's what stays with her. Because now, she's left with the silence you didn't rush to fill. The version of you she can't rewrite. The strength she didn't expect. So when the noise fades, and her pride no longer speaks louder than her heart, guess who she'll remember? The man who didn't explain himself. The man who walked without a word. Let that be you. Number 4, stay grounded in self-worth. When things unravel, it's easy to start questioning your value, especially if she walks away first or shows indifference. Don't fall into that trap. I know it stings when someone you once cared for seems unbothered by your absence, when her silence feels like rejection, and her distance feels like proof that you didn't matter. But here's the truth. Your worth isn't on trial just because someone couldn't recognize it. This is the moment you're tempted to reach out, to explain, to ask why. But you must resist that urge. Because every time you beg for clarity from someone who gave you confusion, you chip away at your own center. Instead of chasing answers, you go inward. You focus on rebuilding the parts of you that may have been shaken, not because she left, but because you forgot how whole you already are. A woman remembers the man who didn't collapse when she pulled away. She remembers the one who didn't try to prove himself, who didn't fight to be seen. Why? Because he didn't need to. His silence didn't come from bitterness. It came from self-respect. He walked without a word, not to hurt her, but because he understood that holding on to himself was more important than holding on to someone who let go first. This is Stoicism in real life. You don't control who values you. You only control how deeply you anchor your sense of worth. Like Marcus Aurelius said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And how you react when she walks away says everything about whether your value comes from within, or if it was borrowed from her attention. So ask yourself, right now, are you trying to prove something? Or are you reminding yourself of who you've always been? Because the man who remains grounded during the storm is the man she remembers long after the noise has faded. And that's the man you want to be, not just for her memory, but for your own peace. Now, take a moment to sit with this. How often have you tried to prove your worth to someone who was no longer listening? It's not a sign of weakness to want to be understood, but it is a sign of growth when you choose not to explain yourself to someone who never really saw you. True self-worth doesn't beg for clarity, and it doesn't unravel just because someone else walked away. So, I want to hear from you. What part of that message hit home the most? Drop your thoughts below, or if you're walking this journey of quiet strength, just type, "My worth isn't up for negotiation." Let's keep this conversation real. Let's keep it grounded. Now, let's move to the next point. Number 5, resist the urge to correct her view. Even if she misjudged you, even if she twisted things, you don't have to defend yourself. Let her sit with her own conclusions. People will believe what they're ready to believe. Trying to fix her perception only creates more tension. And here's the truth. If you stay centered long enough, the truth eventually reveals itself. As Seneca said, "Time heals what reason cannot. Let time do what words cannot. Stand tall. Stay calm. And remember, the strongest men don't always win with arguments. They win with patience." Now listen carefully. This is where it all comes full circle. When a woman remembers the man who walked without a word, she remembers the mystery, the restraint, the calm strength that came from not needing to correct her. You could have sent that long message. You could have told your side, clarified every detail, tried to fix the story she told herself. But you didn't. And that silence, that choice not to chase understanding, it lingers. It makes her wonder, not because you were weak, but because you were grounded. Stoicism reminds us that our peace doesn't depend on how others see us. It depends on how we see ourselves. You don't owe anyone a version of the truth that they're not ready to accept. If she was convinced you were cold, selfish, or distant, let her. If she needed a villain to justify her leaving, let her have it. Let her write the script she needed to walk away. And then let time do the rest. Because sooner or later, especially in quiet moments, reality starts knocking. She starts piecing things together differently. She starts replaying how you reacted, not with anger, not with desperation, but with that firm, unshakable silence that says, "I know who I am. I don't need to defend it." This is where most men lose their power. They rush to fix, to explain, to argue their innocence. But you? You hold the frame. You let her experience the discomfort of not having the last word. You let her realize, in her own time, that maybe she was wrong. Maybe you weren't the problem. Maybe you were the one who saw things clearly, but chose peace over noise. And that is what she remembers. Not your voice, but your silence. Not your explanation, but your absence. Not the words you didn't say, but the weight they carried. So, stay grounded. Stay noble. And above all, trust this. The man who walks without correcting her may be misunderstood in the moment, but he's remembered for a lifetime. Number 6, use distance to regain focus. This isn't about disappearing to make her miss you. It's about using the distance to refocus on you. Think of it this way. While she's lost in the maze of her emotions, you step out of the noise and walk straight into clarity. This is your moment to come back to yourself. Not to manipulate, not to prove anything, but to remember who you are when no one is watching. A woman remembers the man who walked without a word because his silence wasn't empty. It was active. While she expected you to wait around for her texts, you were out there sharpening your mind, strengthening your discipline, and returning to your mission. You didn't vanish out of spite. You chose elevation over explanation. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's what you're doing. You're not punishing her with absence. You're gifting yourself presence. Let her feel the gap you left, not through petty games or coldness, but through the calm you embody and the growth you now pursue. Don't stalk her stories or reread old messages. That's not focus. That's distraction dressed up as hope. Get uncomfortable. Hit the gym when you feel restless. Pick up the book when your mind wanders. Put your energy into something that pays you back, physically, mentally, spiritually. And here's the twist. Your silence, your distance, your calm detachment. It doesn't just get noticed. It gets remembered. Because most men cling. Most men chase. But the one who walks away with purpose, that man becomes unforgettable. So if you're in that space right now, don't wait for her to realize what she lost. Use this space to realize what you were always capable of becoming. And when she looks back, she won't just remember that you walked. She'll remember that you walked without a word and never looked back. Now, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Not just the words, but the truth behind them. Ask yourself, are you using this distance to grow, or are you secretly waiting to be noticed? There's a powerful difference. This isn't about making a woman miss you. It's about making you matter to you again. So I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of this message hit home. Or if you're walking that quiet path of discipline and self-respect, just type, "I'm not lost. I'm becoming." Let's keep going. Number 7, don't be afraid to be forgotten. It's okay if she forgets you. That's not the point. You're not walking this path to linger in her thoughts. You're walking it to stay faithful to who you are when no one's watching. A man who walks without a word isn't trying to leave a trail of heartbreak behind. He's not hoping she'll chase after him or realize too late what she had. That's not his concern anymore. He walks because staying would mean abandoning himself, and a man who values his peace knows that no connection is worth losing his inner compass. There's a quiet dignity in letting go without a farewell. And that silence, though it may seem forgettable at first, often plants a deeper seed. You see, the man who doesn't try to be remembered is usually the one a woman ends up thinking about when the noise fades and real reflection begins. Not because he was dramatic or loud, but because he stood tall in his truth. He didn't try to prove himself. He didn't beg for clarity. He just walked, with calm, with grace, with finality. A Stoic man doesn't concern himself with the judgment of others. He understands, like Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In other words, let them misunderstand. Let them forget. Let them move on. That's not your battlefield. Your energy is too precious to be spent convincing someone to see your worth. Instead, your focus is on refining your character, sharpening your discipline, and walking your own path, even if no one's clapping. If she forgets you, it means she was never ready to understand the weight of what you carried in silence. But don't carry resentment. Don't carry hope either. Just carry yourself. And trust that the man who keeps walking, even without recognition, is the one who eventually becomes unforgettable. Not because he wanted to be remembered, but because his silence said everything that words never could. Number 8. Let her sit in the space she chose. If she was the one who pulled back, respect that distance. Don't interrupt it. Let her feel what life is like without your presence. Don't check in. Don't chase. Don't try to reopen a door that she chose to close. Your restraint creates contrast. While most men rush to fill the void with apologies or validation, you do something far more powerful. You stay still. And in that stillness, she gets to face herself, not your reactions. That silence you hold. It's not passive and it's not cold. It's a choice, a discipline, a reflection of a man who no longer throws his energy at things beyond his control. The Stoics taught that peace is found not in changing the world, but in mastering your response to it. So when she created distance, you didn't resist it. You honored it, not out of pride, but out of principle. That's the mark of a man who knows his value isn't tied to whether someone stays, but to how unwavering he remains when they go. This doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've learned to hold your emotions without letting them drag you into impulsive action. Most men, when faced with rejection or silence, panic. They text, they call, they beg to be understood. But when you walk in silence, you invite her to experience the full weight of her own decision. You don't soften the consequences. You don't step in to rescue her from the emptiness she created. And that's exactly what begins to shift the dynamic. She may not say it, but she notices. The lack of reaction, the absence of pursuit. The space once filled by your steady presence now echoes with unanswered thoughts. And while she may try to distract herself or convince herself she's fine, a part of her starts to feel the void, not just as emptiness, but as contrast. The kind of contrast that makes her realize not every man would have stayed silent with such grace. That's why a woman remembers the man who walked without a word. Not because he made noise, but because he didn't. Because in a world full of men who chase, explain, and plead, he was the one who bowed out without performance. Not to win, not to manipulate, but to protect something sacred, his own peace. So if you're in that space now, let her sit in it. Let her experience the distance she once chose. Your job is not to pull her back. Your job is to remain calm in your center and rebuild your world without needing her applause. And if she ever turns around and looks for you, she won't find desperation. She'll find a man who stood his ground. And that's exactly what makes him unforgettable. Number 9. Detach with kindness, not resentment. Walking away doesn't mean walking out bitter. That's where most people get it wrong. They think silence must be cold, or that detachment has to come with a sting. But the truth is, the strongest kind of detachment isn't loud. It's kind. It's when you leave without slamming the door, without sending one last jab to satisfy your ego. You don't need to show her that you're winning. You don't need to prove you've moved on. You just move, quietly, calmly, powerfully. Imagine this. She expected anger, or maybe even begging. She thought you'd try to get the last word. But instead, you surprised her. You walked without a word, without resentment, and without theatrics. You carried yourself with dignity. And that's what lingers. That's what burns slower, deeper, and longer. It's easy to forget someone who lashed out. It's harder to forget the one who left in peace. The Stoics spoke about apatheia, not as emotional numbness, but as the disciplined state where your peace is no longer hostage to outside chaos. That's what you embody when you choose grace over drama. You don't need to hate her to walk away. You just need to love your peace more than you love chasing closure. And here's the twist. When you walk with kindness, you leave a different kind of echo. Not guilt, not fear, but reflection. A quiet voice in her mind that says, "He didn't fight me. He didn't shame me. He just let me go." That's when memory grips her tighter than any argument could. So no, this isn't about being nice to win her back. This is about staying true to who you are. A man who knows his worth doesn't need to burn the bridge. He just knows when it's no longer worth crossing. And a woman always remembers the man who walked without a word, because he left with something most people never do: his peace intact. And maybe now's the moment to turn the mirror on yourself, because how you leave says everything about how you live. Have you ever walked away with kindness instead of anger? Or are you still learning how to let go without needing closure? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of that message hit home for you. Or if you're walking that quiet path of peace, just type, "I walk without resentment." Let's keep this conversation going, because the way you carry yourself in silence often speaks louder than anything you could say. Ready for what comes next? Let's keep moving. Number 10. Practice presence without needing attention. Start becoming the kind of man whose presence is powerful, even in absence. You don't need to constantly be seen or heard to matter. In fact, the most unforgettable presence is often the quietest. When you no longer seek validation from the outside world, when your value isn't tied to who texts back, who watches your stories, or who claps for you, you begin to tap into something deeper. That's the essence of Stoicism: to live with intention, not for applause. When a woman remembers the man who walked without a word, it's not because he made a final speech or delivered one last dramatic message. It's because he showed restraint, clarity, and discipline. Qualities most men lose when emotions run high. While others try to prove a point, he simply chose peace over performance. That kind of man becomes a mirror. His absence makes her confront what his presence once gave her, and now, quietly, takes away. Think of the man who leaves a relationship not by slamming the door, but by closing it gently, without bitterness, without noise. He doesn't text paragraphs. He doesn't post cryptic quotes or chase closure. He just leaves, with his dignity intact and his focus intact. Weeks later, she starts to feel something strange. It's not just the space he left. It's the stillness, the calm, the weight of a man who never tried to be remembered. Yet, somehow, he is. That's the power of presence without performance. When you live like a man with vision, training in silence, loving without attachment, walking away without anger, you leave something behind that words could never match. You leave your essence, and that, brother, lingers far longer than attention ever will. So stay on your path. Whether eyes are on you or not, carry yourself like someone who knows exactly where he's going. Build yourself in the shadows. Move with clarity. Speak only when it adds value. And let your silence say what noise never could. I don't need to be seen to matter. Because the man who lives by principle, not performance, is the one she remembers when the room gets quiet. Number 11. Become the lesson, not the exception. Don't aim to be the one she misses most. Aim to be the one who left her with a standard she can't forget. The man who stayed calm, who didn't chase, who leveled up in silence, who walked away when things no longer aligned. That's not cold, that's clarity. That's not revenge, that's evolution. And you know what? That kind of presence doesn't fade. When a man walks without pleading, without needing to explain his worth, he leaves something behind. Not just a memory, but a mirror. A mirror that reflects who she was when she had him, and who she let go. That's the essence of becoming the lesson. You're not there to prove a point or seek applause. You're not performing. You're simply holding your line, holding your peace, and letting your absence echo louder than any speech ever could. A Stoic man doesn't chase recognition. He lives in alignment with his values and lets the consequences unfold. As Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You don't become unforgettable by talking about your worth. You become unforgettable by living it, quietly, consistently, and without apology. Let her remember the steadiness, the way you didn't flinch when she pulled back, the way you didn't spiral when you were misunderstood, the way you chose dignity over desperation. That becomes her internal benchmark, not just for romance, but for how a man of value truly moves. So don't try to outshine the next guy or leave the loudest impression. That's what the crowd does. Instead, become the one she quietly compares everyone else to. The man who didn't just leave, he left her wiser. Because he wasn't the exception to her pattern, he became the reason she had to change it. The truth is, some women don't realize your value until you're no longer around to remind them. And by then, you've already outgrown the need to be understood. That's the shift that changes everything. You're not walking away for revenge. You're walking towards something greater. A life anchored in purpose. A path that doesn't pause for approval. Her memory? Just a chapter, not the title of your story. If this message spoke to something real inside you, drop a comment below and let me know. What part hit the hardest today? And if you're on that journey, calm, clear, and no longer chasing, just type, "My path is my answer." Until next time, keep walking, not to be seen, but because you see where you're going.